Hi, and welcome to another episode of Professional Profiles. I'm your host, Codi Alenxader. Here with us in the studio today is Mr. Duaine Goodno. He's here to talk to us a little bit about the opportunities girls have playing sports in Afghanistan. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Goodno.
It's my pleasure, Codi.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm retired from working for the Department of Defense, and I spent 3 years over in Afghanistan living there.
That sounds exciting. Did you go over there for work, or?
I went over there to see if there's anything I could do to help after my retirement, and found it so pleasurable that I stayed for 3 years.
What college did you go to?
Back in Minnesota, Morehead State University.
Did that have any impact on your job choice, or was it?
My field is actually preschool administration, my degree. And that has impacted on my interest in developing girls' leadership.
What sports did you like to play when you were younger?
Mostly baseball, and never played soccer until high school.
Really? I play soccer, so I really enjoy it.
For us older people, soccer wasn't around very much.
Oh. First, could you tell us about the issue here? Like, do many people know about the issue concerning the inequality of sports in Afghanistan?
No, I think very few people are aware or concerned about sports for children in Afghanistan.
Okay, well, personally, I think that everybody, no matter what gender or race or where they're from, should be able to play sports. And that's probably because I've played soccer for a lot of my life. But why do you feel so strongly about that?
Well, what we find is that children develop leadership skills with sports, and therefore sports is an important component of an educational process and development for future leaders in Afghanistan or anywhere else.
Can you explain to us the program that you and Awista Ayub started last summer when you brought 8 Afghan girls to the U.S. to play soccer?
Right. Actually, the program started the February before. Awista was looking for Afghan children to come to the U.S., and I was looking for a way to get children to have experiences in the United States. I was in Afghanistan at the time, and this would have been 2 summers ago that we were able to get together, develop a program, and then have 8 girls come to the U.S. to play soccer. The interesting thing is they had never played soccer before probably March, April of that year, and yet they competed in the July in the International Children's Games in Cleveland, Ohio.
How well did they do?
They had a lot of fun. They did very well. They were very excited. It wasn't about winning, it was about playing.
Did you have any modesty concerns that were voiced by either the children or the parents about the closing of the U.S.?
Well, modesty is of concern. In Afghanistan, we never wear uniforms, soccer uniforms per se. Here in the United States they did, but their shorts were all the way down to their knees, and they wore long leggings, and so we found ways to work around the modesty issue.
What other work do you do in Afghanistan with women and girls there?
Well, I'm the country director of the Afghan Center, which we have done vocational training for over 1,000 Afghan women. A year ago, in the run-up to the election, we actually marched over 500 women through the streets of Kabul to register to vote. And some of them were wearing burqa, fully covered, everything else as they marched through the street.
So do you have any other more current projects that you could tell us about?
Well, I continue to work with the girls in girls leadership. We have a girls leadership program. I brought 3 girls to the U.S. last year, and at least 2 girls will return this year. Those 2 are attending an international school in Kabul. It's actually what would normally have been called the American school, but for security reasons we no longer use the word American when we name our schools. So those children are having all of their classes in English, and so they will come to the United States so their English skills will develop more fully.
How old are the girls?
14 and 15 now, and these 2 are part of the original girls. This will be their 3rd trip to the U.S.
Oh, then they must be pretty excited about it.
Oh, they're always excited to come to the U.S.
Let's backtrack for a minute.
Sure. Sure.
Before the Taliban came to power, Afghanistan had been ruled by Soviets and then by a strict Afghan communist government. Could women play sports, work, and uncover their faces during that time?
Yeah, let me actually add to the history. Before the communist rule, Afghanistan actually had a king. Communists came in, took over. When the communists were kicked out, then we had, basically the country was broken up into pieces. And that's when the primary fighting occurred, was after the Soviets. There was no one political force, and chaos reigned. And it was the Taliban who came in and put a stop to the chaos. But in the process, they put severe restrictions on all people. As far as women and girls, during the era of the king, it was rather progressive. Kabul was somewhat known as the Paris of Southwest Asia. Women wore dresses, most were uncovered, but elsewhere in the country, many women wore burqas or were covered.
By choice or?
By choice or by custom. So much about what we're talking about is custom. Even today, most of the women wear burqas. And if you ask them, it's really for their own protection. It's not that the Taliban are there. It's that they don't get hassled. They're anonymous when they go out on the street. So there's a bit of safety in it.
So would there be threats if the women didn't wear their burqas?
There are threats and rude comments to women when they don't. And quite frankly, though, many women in Kabul will not wear burqas today.
And then you mentioned that the Taliban actually came and put a stop to a lot of the problems and chaos. So at the beginning, did many people support the Taliban because of that?
That's true.
Or?
That's very true. The Taliban had public support to begin with, but the longer they were in power, just like you will see in many countries, as somebody who's trying to do good comes into power, that power often corrupts them. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with the Taliban.
According to my research, when the Taliban came to power in the 1990s, they imposed so many rules that it was described for women as a virtual house arrest. What are the kinds of rules that were put in place?
Well, in fact, for most women, it was house arrest. They could not leave their compounds. Most Afghan houses have walls, big brick walls around them, and the women would just stay within those walls. They would live their whole lives within those walls. They wouldn't go to the market. They couldn't be employed. Before the Taliban, women could be teachers, doctors, in a number of different fields. But the Taliban put a stop to that. They didn't want women doctors. They didn't want, certainly didn't want teachers. They didn't want anyone to go to school.
I know that was put in place because it was supposed to be like a fundamentalist Muslim rule, but were all of those actually Muslim laws that women could not?
No, not at all, and that's a huge misconception by many people. They think that this somehow has to do with Islam, and it does not. It has to do with custom and a corrupt interpretation of Islam for their own purpose.
So you mentioned that the women couldn't leave their compounds, but inside the compounds, were there any opportunities to play sports or exercise at all during the Taliban reign?
No. Sports, making any noise, laughing, those things would be punished. So even within the compound, you had to be careful. Music was banned.
Wow, that sounds
Yes.
really harsh. If you personally lived in Afghanistan right now with your younger daughters, would you send them to school and let them participate in sports without the burqa? Depending on, would anybody make any comments toward an American living there?
Yeah, actually, for girls growing up today, there's a certain age when burqas are worn as a girl becomes more mature. Before that, it's usually head coverings. Head coverings for a non-Muslim still shows respect and country that is 99.99% Muslim.
So, on a happier note, Afghan girls are making progress. At the Summer 2004 Olympics in Athens, Greece, two young women, Robina Mukimar and Fariba Razi, competed as the first two women from Afghanistan ever to be in the Games. Now the Winter 2006 Olympics are here. Are there any Afghan women competing here, or is there just men? Or
Let me first correct something that comes out in the media sometimes, and that's Afghan versus Afghani. We do call Afghans Afghans. Afghani is often a term that we hear, but for some Afghans, especially Afghan Americans, they see it as a derogatory word.
Why derogatory?
Actually, Afghani is what the money in Afghanistan is called.
Oh, well, thank you for correcting me.
That's quite all right. It's very common. So back to your question, which was?
Are there any women competing in the Winter 2006?
Right. There are not. Afghanistan has not had a winter sports program. There is one person who is active in skiing in Afghanistan. And so winter sports, I think, will take a little bit longer to develop.
What about the Summer 2008 Olympics in Beijing? Are there going to be more women there?
There will certainly be women there. More, probably. And for instance, today in Afghanistan, there are, I believe, 20 official girls football teams, which would be soccer. Football teams working with the Olympic Committee. There's one Olympic development team.
I've heard about Afghan women athletes competing in judo and track at international levels, but what sports are more popular locally?
Well, the normal girl sport is volleyball. That's what girls are expected to play, girls like to play. But of course, football is up and coming and spreading.
Is there any reason that some sports are more still male dominated and some, like volleyball, are more female?
Well, for instance, basketball, we try to introduce basketball. There are some schools where basketball is played, girls' schools, but you need a nice concrete pad, you need hoops. It's a little bit more complicated even than soccer. Soccer, you can go out and kick the ball in the street. But for basketball, it's really hard to dribble in the ruins of a building that has holes from bombs and that type of thing. So.
Are there more facilities being set up for girls to have the opportunity to try different sports?
There are. It's very, very slow. The U.S. government, this U.S. State Department, actually does support sports for children in Afghanistan.
Are you happy with the progress that has been made in Afghanistan since the end of the Taliban rule?
There's been a tremendous amount of progress. Am I happy with it? I'm happy with the amount of progress that's been made. I would be happier if more had been made.
How long do you think it will take for Afghan girls to reach the sports equality that we have here in the U.S.?
Not in my lifetime, I'm afraid.
So you think there's going to be...
I plan to live a long time. It's going to take a very long time. In most areas of Afghanistan, girls are still prevented from playing, would be prevented from playing soccer in front of boys, for instance.
What areas are those? Are those, I'm guessing, more out in the country instead of
Practically
urban?
anywhere outside of Kabul. So anywhere in the countryside, yes.
What about for school? Are mostly all girls in school right now?
A lot of girls have started to go to school. The numbers are very high now, but they're still not where they're supposed to be. In Kabul, I believe it is close to 50-50 with boys, but in the provinces it's low as 5%.
Are there any programs being set up to help girls out in more rural areas and not in Kabul to be able to?
Yes. It's much harder to work outside of Kabul because of security issues. Schools are still being burned, and mostly girls' schools. So when a school is built, somebody comes along and burns it down. So progress goes forward by 2 steps and back by 1.
Are there any other dangers other than just setting fire to schools? Are there any dangers towards specifically some of the girls who want to play sports more, or is it just basically just the school buildings?
It's mostly the school buildings. Also, a number of teachers have been killed. As far as students go, I'm not aware of any students who have directly been injured or killed. However, many threats are made against them, and it's a great concern with my girls that play soccer.
If somebody in the U.S. would like to contribute to the effort being made to find fairness between male and female athletes in Afghanistan, what could they do to help?
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, I do bring girls here to the United States. Those are very expensive trips, but also very necessary. So if somebody wants to help, there's a variety of ways that they can help, either monetarily or even volunteering to work with the girls when they're here.
Are there any specific websites that people can go to find out more information about that?
Yes. www.afghancenter, as one word, .com, or excuse me, .org, does provide some information.
Okay, well, thank you. Our time is up, but I greatly appreciate you coming out to talk to us. I learned a lot today.
Cody, it has been a pleasure talking to your audience today.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time with more professional profiles.